So when an organization or a person presents our office with a recall petition, normally we are presented with this document, and it's filled out in its capacity. For this particular election, we did not receive that, nor did we receive any page numbers in completion form from one to the final number that was also presented to us. That did not happen for this particular recall. A sample of what is supposed to happen is, once we receive the sheets, we verify. We verify the person's signature, the person's name, year of birth, signature date, registration precinct, the address, witness names, and the date that the person signed. It also should entail the same date that the voter signed. In many of these instances, that did not occur. As opposed to the original list and the supplemental list, we do have examples. This first set of example contains a signature page that contains Disney characters on there. 15 names of Disney characters. The next sample of both original and supplementals had names of organizers or witnesses instead of the mayor in her official capacity. So this page could also not be accepted.
Can you go back and talk about that Disney character?
Absolutely.
Like, is it like Daffy Duck or like Mickey Mouse? I mean, is that what was on the sheet?
I can read it to you, or you can view it. The first one is Minnie Mouse. I'm just going to call the names of them. Minnie Mouse, Mickey Mouse, Princess Tiana, Cinderella, Shrek, Goofy D, Doc, Dwarf, Bashville, Happy Dwarf, Sleeping Beauty, Donald Duck, Princess Charming, Fred Flintstone, Scooby-Doo, and Barney Rubble.
And that's what they submitted to you as petitions?
Yes.
Originally or the subsequent submission?
Both. So, I'm glad you asked that question also. Our supplemental list seems to be a complete duplicate of the original. I can show you an example when we process our original list. And this one, I'm sorry, can't be recorded, but I'll let you view this list. It shows where we went in on an original page and compared it to a supplemental list, and the supplemental list had the exact names that the original persons had. How many? 90%.
90% of the second batch of names.
That is correct.
You're saying the reason why those were discounted is because they were duplicates.
That's correct.
Gotcha.
Also, in the supplemental box, the entire set of the supplemental box were not the original form. They were copied forms. They were not the original documents on the second batch that were submitted to our office on the 27th.
So the second batch, right? Did you go through and verify any of those?
We verified each and every on the second batch. So when you look at the number, you look at 67,000. That's why the number was so high, because it was a duplicate of the first batch.
So over 30,000 were duplicates?
That's correct.
So basically, the second list that came in at the end of the grace period was just a photocopy of the first list with a couple more names, basically.
That's correct.
And we'll be able to see that today?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Also, we received hundreds of pages where, when they made their copies, they included additional pages on a individual page. For example, this was page 1, page 2, page 3. It contains 5 voters. We could not count it because not only did it not provide the voter signature, it was not legible for us to make out who the person was or the intent of the voter.
Just out of curiosity, if you did a cross-reference with the actual the petitions that were submitted by the recall, would you think we would still find that Mickey Mouse, Minnie Mouse page?
I'm pretty sure. I can't 100% answer that question.
Wait, you said, wait, hold on. How can
I said it was a duplicate. I did.
No, I'm talking about with all of the Disney characters. If I were to go and ask the recall petitioners for their pages that they submitted, there should probably be one with all of these characters, or was that added later?
I don't know that question. I can't answer. I can't speak on
answer that?
I can't speak on behalf of the recallers, but I can speak on the behalf of what our office received. If you would like to go and look, which was a copy, if you would like to go and look in this box and obtain the copy of the Mickey Mouse sheet, you have all day
So
to.
that one was a copy, but not an original.
Every box of the supplemental list was a copy.
So
It was
no-
not
no
an original.
documents of people putting Disney characters in
Not that was submitted from the petitioners.
And I'll say this as well.
Mr. Lemonade, would you please get to the mic if you can talk
Yeah.
first?
And first, why don't you introduce yourself?
Oh, sorry. I am Danielle Duplessis Hammond, the Chief Deputy Registrar under Dr. Wilson.
Thank you.
And look, this is not my moment, this is obviously their moment, but I did want to say that for purposes of the, both the first and second box of documents that were delivered to us, we were told by the petitioners that they did not keep a copy. In fact, they asked us to produce and make available to them a copy of those after the certification process
So
was
they
done.
didn't submit them, they were submitted another way, is what you're saying?
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, when you ask the question as to whether the petitioners would have a copy, the original or a copy of the Disney characters, we were told by the petitioners that they did not retain their own copy.
So you were told by the petitioners that they didn't have any records of Disney characters, but you have a copy?
We're saying the records themselves. So look at the records in their entirety. We were told by the petitioners that when they submitted the records on February 22nd, or the second tranche of documents on February 27th, at 5 days after, that they did not keep their own copy.
So they don't have originals, is what you're saying? They didn't keep any originals?
That's what they told us.
So you guys should only have originals then, right? Not
We,
copies?
we have what they gave us.
Was it surprising to you that the second wave that came in were so many duplicates at the grace period?
It was definitely a surprise. It was also a surprise that the second wave included dates prior to the actual submission of the petitioner deadline. For example, the petitioner deadline was February 22nd, and the dates that we received on February 27th, the photocopied ones, were from as far back as August through February.
So, Dr. Wilson, if I could ask you a question as well. Have you seen anything like this before? And if you wouldn't mind, ma'am, going to the,
Actually, we have never taken on a project this big, so no, I've never seen anything like that, and we certainly were expecting the records to have more order and to have more documents that would allow them to proceed with their goal. As far as what they have, we don't know, but as far as what they have, we don't know, but we receive all these documents, and we've made numerous copies, and it was the originals that had to go to the governor's office.
now, I have a follow-up. As you may be aware, the recall leaders are talking about exploring legal opportunities. As we talk today, are you confident that what you certify will withstand a court challenge?
Very confident.
What standard were you guys using in the certification process, like those signatures, what were you comparing it to originally? I just want to ask about that standard.
We use the statewide computer system, Aaron, to check records between what the petitioners brought us, the organizers brought us, and what was on file. So we looked at the voter registration information, date of birth, addresses, signatures for sure. So we had to check signatures that we had on file for voters and compare that to the ones that were on the documents.
This could be a question for you or Mr. Luminay even. I'm just going to ask you, do you think this is fraud? I mean, should somebody take a look at this, given the fact that clearly Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck are Disney characters, and they have to sign off legally on a process like this?
Really,
Allegedly.
I'm sorry.
Do you think this is fraud?
I actually am what we've been calling the bean counter. We've counted the records, we received the records, we verified the records, we certified the records, and we are quite sure that what we've done is proper and in keeping with the law. So I have no idea, if I could categorize it any other way than say that we did our part.
Would you or your attorney refer this to anybody in law enforcement?
Say again?
Would you or your attorney refer this to anybody in law enforcement?
I imagine that would be the AG's office, perhaps. I don't know. It's not mine.
How many people were working on this, and how long did it take? I know you guys said you did the process twice, so can you explain how the timeline?
I would say all in all about 40 people, 30 people, including our staff. You know, we have, what, 8 people, so we had other jobs to do in between, but we knew that we were the ones that had to take responsibility for this, and those people who were allowed to do it, and those people were electors from several parishes.
And how long did it take?
We finished on the 20th or the 21st. It was a Sunday. Yeah, we finished on Sunday. And I'll be at the dates. Yeah, we finished the Sunday before they would do.
And with that being said, did you bring in anyone else from outside to help certify these names?
Outside of elections, electors, election people, no.
And again, ma'am, it was, I know you showed the form, so what is that form called? And again, how did you use the form to certify that?
Well, the form actually asked for the number of people who signed petition, the number of people who were certified, and the form is called the Registrar Certification Form.
And that's the form that was not originally submitted, correct?
And one of the other reasons, it says profanity. Can you just
What am I
explain kind of the standards for profanity and what is deemed profanity, who sets that standard, and kind of where on those signatures on those papers there was profanity?
The only thing that we're responsible for is identifying that voter, making sure that they are who they are, looking for the date of birth, their names, the signatures, addresses, and that's what we do. As far as the Mickey Mouse and the Donald Duck and the profanity, all we could do was make copies to make sure that that everything we received, we had a copy of.
So why were they thrown out for
They-
profanity?
They weren't thrown out. They were copied, and everything that we received, we had to keep. But they didn't count.
Do y'all feel like this was a total waste of your time being with all these crazy names on there?
I think that we had more responsibilities to the public other than doing this. And it was disappointing, not saying that we're taking a side because we're impartial, but when you have spent this many hours doing this work and the work is not even up to par, yes, it's a little, it takes you aback.
How many total valid signatures do you have? What's that total final number
about
of
27,000?
validated signatures? And you're saying that, again, the 99% that you guys invalidated were all duplicates of originals, and that they did not have 67 original signatures to come in, that half of them were duplicates. That's what we're saying?
Yes, it is.
All right.
The number is 27243.
So, not to pivot off, so go ahead, Matt, I think, go ahead.
Yeah, there were a few signatures during that 5-day edition withdrawal period that were counted towards the total. What was different about those, if anything, from these documents, the signatures and the copy back?
Well, the law tells us that if an individual comes into the office and wish to take advantage of that extra time, that they could, but only individuals. So if Sandra Wilson wanted to add her name to the petition, I had that time to do it. If I wanted to be taken off, I could also do that. Those are the only documents actually that we should have received.
Can you address the, sorry, Jeff, go ahead, Jeff.
So 2 questions. One, I just wanted to be sure we're clear on the terminology. When you say that the second batch was all duplicates, it was duplicated from the first batch, right? Not
Yes.
just that they were photocopies instead of originals.
Yes,
right?
yes.
That's correct.
And secondly, do you all have an estimate at this point of how much this process has cost the office above and beyond normal?
Well, it's just ending now, so we don't really have an idea of that right now. It would just be speculation, not at all. I'd like to also say that the deadline, as you know, to return these documents to our office, the documents that we're calling supplemental, actually, their deadline was missed.
It doesn't matter, they were duplicates.
So when those came in, we didn't have to even add them. You wouldn't have had the number that you have
So y'all
now.
even count the ones that were brought in that 5-day
Oh,
period?
we did.
You counted them?
We did it as a precaution,
You did it as a precaution, but they were all
Right.
duplicates is what you're saying.
yes.
So
How many hours do you think that counting that second?
The second second batch probably took more than the first batch.
Sorry, can you go to the podium?
No.
The second batch took more time than the first batch because they were illegible. It was a number of factors that hindered us from getting to the actual meat of the item. Yes.
Did any of y'all feel like at any point in the process there was criminal intent?
I will say that I wish that voters could have known that that second batch was presented, especially the ones that were dated before the petitioner deadline.
I'm sorry, you said something about, go ahead.
You have a batch that submitted, that people knowingly submitted false names. Is that criminal?
Let me answer. You gonna answer? Yeah.
So I think, just like the answer of fraud, criminal is something for a court to sure, just like the answer is to fraud, criminal is something for a court to determine. But just like fraud, I mean, you can have circumstantial evidence that can show both fraud and also potentially criminal intent. But again, that's for something a court or a judge to determine, and certainly not something that the registrar in her office determines. But nonetheless, I mean, based on what you're hearing, based on what the team observed, very unusual and abnormal circumstances, especially in connection with the second batch that was delivered on February 27th.
I'm sorry, you said something about the second batch having ineligible signatures. Wouldn't those same signatures have been ineligible in the first batch, and so they wouldn't count because it was all duplicates?
Being that we did take the steps to review the second batch, even though we should not have done so, well, not should have not have done so, but we did do it as a courtesy to the process and wanted to be as transparent as possible. The second batch did reflect other items outside of being duplicates. The incorrect year of birth. It's a plethora of
When was
things.
the Mickey Mouse submitted, first batch or second batch or both?
I can't answer that question. no, thank you.
Excuse me?
I can't answer that question.
Can't
no.
answer that question. When was the Mickey Mouse submitted, first batch, second batch, or both?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Not today, JD. Got him. You might want to answer that, dude. That might be one for you. Yeah, I got you.
Dr. Wilson, you started at the outset to talk about, I know you guys had questions, wanted to know things, but we were doing the work. Can you expound on, what it entailed to get this done and why, of course there were public records requests and all that, and why you had to turn to segments of the law that allowed you not to stop what you were doing to do that?
When we received the documents, it was our charge to go through every document to ensure that the process that was being used was going to benefit those persons who submitted those documents, and we did really felt like they were going to be, just going through the batch. But as I said, we had to identify the voter and make sure that the person who signed that petition was actually a registered voter. We needed their date of birth, we needed their address, and we needed to verify their signatures. So we did go through every page, and we did go the extra mile because we wanted to make sure that we took every precaution to ensure that, you want a cough drop?
No, I'm good.
We wanted to ensure that we were doing the right thing and that we were satisfying those persons.
You mentioned transparency. Why was this so secret on your end? I repeatedly asked to inspect the records as per state law. I was allowed to do that, and you guys repeatedly violated that law and not letting me inspect the records.
Well, number one, a lot of persons who requested information for us were going to revised statute 44.2 or something, I don't remember the number. And with our office, we abide by revised statute 154. And so those are two different.
I have the revised statute 154 right here.
And on top of that, we were dealing with a live process To give you a third of those numbers would have tainted the process, and it would have prevented us from meeting our deadline. So we really could not stop that process.
Well, revised statute 154, as I have right here, says the records of each registrar are public records, and at all times during office hours shall be open to inspection except the early voting confirmation sheets and voters.
Except that this was a moving operation, and to give you even a piece of it would stop the work, and it would also, it would stop the flow of the work. And if we gave you an opportunity, which I don't think we could, there is no way that we could have finished this process.
Could you, not to pivot, but could you respond to the agreement between the recall organizers and the Secretary of State that struck 25,000 people off the rolls? Did you have deceased people or people living outside of Orleans on the active list?
We followed to the letter of the law the procedures for processing voters throughout with everything that we do. So when we have information that we can process, we process it. So our office has done everything that we needed to with regard to that. With regard to the recall, I know I'm being redundant, we just had to follow that procedure, to the procedures that were given to us that are in the law, and keep this work product going so that we could provide the information needed at the end of the
The gentleman mentioned something about that's for the courts to decide. Is this something y'all intend to bring to the courts?
The only responsibility we have with this is actually what we said earlier, going through the documents, making sure that we're doing everything we can to make sure that the process is not tainted, and we did all of that.
Hey, yo, my man, you gonna answer that question about the Mickey Mouse or not? No? Okay.
I can't even see over here.
Dr. Wilson, under the law, the recall organizers are treated as custodians of public records. Do you think they fulfilled their obligations under the law? The recall organizers under the law are treated as custodians of public records. Do you think they fulfilled their obligations under the law?
Well, I can't.
You got this microphone.
I can only assume that the organizers had good intentions. When we got the documents, all we could do was go through the proper procedures to make sure that everything that was brought to us was being processed properly. In terms of that, that's what we do. As far as their intent, I have no answer for that.
Dr. Wilson, if someone was to ask you, how did you do with this task, this daunting task that you took on? How would you rate the job you did, 1 to 10? How would you rate what you guys did?
I would say even more than 10, because that second batch of documents that we were going through, that whole group, with the exception of the people who actually had the right to come in and add or remove their names from the list, should have been brought in individually. When we receive these documents, we don't know what's inside of them. We know we've got to review them. Actually, according to the law, the ones that we received on the 27th, we did not actually have to process any of those other than the people who brought theirs in individually. But we did, and the reason we did was because in case something like this happened, we wanted to be able to explain and to show what was in those documents. And we really did not have to receive them at all.
And it was all copies?
Sir?
And it was all copies?
Sir?
It was all copies?
Yes, I would say yes.
Not to get to the heads of anybody here, but when they turned in the first batch on Ash Wednesday and were dancing in front of City Hall, do you think that appears to be a charade?
I think they may have thought that they had reached their goal. I don't know what they were thinking. And when we received the boxes, we didn't immediately go through them. We stacked them, we secured them, and that was basically all we could do. I don't think we started working on those until maybe 3 or 4 days later.
There was in the certification, the actual page with their signature on it, it's dated February 21st, 2023, instead of March 21st, 2023.
Yes,
I
and
assume it's just an accent. Can you just speak to that?
yes, I can. We've actually corrected that, and it was a mistake.
On that second batch, were they all complete duplicates? So every page had the exact same name, like listed down, or were some of them mixed up?
We actually had blanks, and we actually had all the ones we mentioned, all the Disney characters and whatnot, the profanity and whatnot, and they were in no order. None at all. So that added to what we needed to do, because we had to try to put them in order.
How do you count
We
blanks?
also,
How do you count blanks?
you can't. You can't count them. You can copy them.
Dr. Wilson, you know, under the law, I don't think
Let's see.
there's any, the recall organizers had an obligation to say they were turning in Mickey Mouse and Donald Ducks. Do you think they should have anyway?
I don't know what their intent was. I believe they wanted to get everything that they had to us, but I can't speculate as to their intent. I would hope that they brought their documents in earnest, and we wanted to go through that process in a manner that would show them and the public that we did our due diligence.
Legally, and I'm not a lawyer, I think Illuminate may be the only person in the
I'm
law
not
to
either.
agree, but from what you just said, did they have to validate and sign off on those signatures that could possibly be, I hate to go back to this, a crime in any way?
They meaning the organizers? I don't know what their intent was, as I can't say that they were trying to be fraudulent. I think that they were submitting those documents as best I can in earnest. And they may have thought that they had the numbers they needed to achieve their goal.
Are you preparing for this legal challenge that could come from the recall leaders at this point?
We want to get our work done. We're going through early voting. We're preparing for another election. And if that happens, let the chips fall where they may.
Dr. Wilson, you've been a registrar here in New Orleans for many years. Is this the most difficult thing you've ever had to deal with in your entire career as a registrar?
In terms of doing work, in terms of doing this kind of work, when the goal wasn't achieved, and looking at some of the documents that we received was a bit disconcerting. It was an arduous process. Our people we worked as many as 12 to 20 hours a day to get this done, and I wanted to have it done. So we were here on Sundays and whatever. So, I mean, we wanted this to be fair, a fair process.
I have a question. So the form that was given to the governor had like 4,000 and some duplicates, but now you're saying that the majority of that second batch were duplicates. Why wasn't that listed that way?
When we impute the into the Aaron system, it calculates based on whether that particular person was accepted or whether it was a duplicate. So when you have pages that are that you cannot process through the Aaron system, it doesn't receive it that way. And a lot of the documents, if you look at them, they weren't allowing us to impute them based on us not having the full information as opposed to the original sheet. The original list that was submitted to us, the photocopy version that was submitted to our office did not have everything listed on there.
And it's called Aaron system?
Yes.
ERIN.
ERIN,
Education. No, not education. Election
Registration Information Network. Sorry.
If they were just duplicates, why didn't you just cross-reference the first batch?
As mentioned, we did the second batch for transparency. So in the transparency portion of that, we could not combine those lists together. So that way, if there was a need to review those lists, you can see that the differences, and you can also tally those persons who were duplicated on there from list to list.
So did you run the second batch through the Aaron system?
We did.
You did, but they came up as duplicates. But you just said you couldn't verify on the second batch because it was different than the first batch. But I thought it was all duplicates. So it's just duplicates, why do they look different?
We were advised not to combine the lists through councils. So as a result, we can distinguish that this was the original list and this was a supplemental list that we were not, that we did as a courtesy. And so in doing so, you cannot combine those two lists, but we can showcase through the Aaron system as well as through the documents that both lists had duplicate names on there. So for instance, if Sally signed on the original list and Sally signed on the duplicate list, we can show you that she signed on both of those lists.
But they should all be Sally, right? Because you said it was just, the second list was just a duplicate of the first.
And if that's the case, then the first,
If that's the case.
so in regards to your question, then the supplemental list would not have existed if it was submitted in the same date as the other list was
That makes
submitted.
no sense.
I know it doesn't, but that's how it happened.
I wanted to ask about something you said at the start about the form they should have turned in. Should they have given you some kind of form with a final count, and did they give you a final count? You know, what they thought they had collected?
Absolutely, that's a great question. And then that could have given them some leverage to say, hey, we submitted page 1 of 2021, whatever, but they did not do that for us. So as a result, this page should have been submitted in their initial batch, or if you decided to bring a supplemental list, then it should have provided in the second list. That way, once we completed our task, they could come and say, hey, we gave you these lists, which was not done.
But the second list was a duplicate of the first list, right?
Right, so even if it was a duplicate, you still should have provided the first one. Absolutely. This page is able to be printed out from the Secretary of State's website. At the bottom, it says page 1, and in normal recalls, the person would have their ending page on there.
So you're saying the reason why they were disqualified is because they didn't have the original first sheet, right? So every single sheet with numbers needed an original first sheet and a last sheet to be submitted with every single signature? Is
Not
that
with
the law?
not with every single signature, but we didn't receive even the first page
For anything?
for anything.
Can you just kind of explain what information is on that, what they should have filled out?
Absolutely.
I thought that was the page that the recall signers had to sign at the Secretary of State's office, not the actual petitioners. Because I saw that over there.
Yeah, and they too had to sign that sheet and submit it to us as well.
So every single person who say they had to sign all of this and their signature?
Not the petitioners, the ones who submitted, the chairman and the co-chair, they should have submitted
The
this too.
Secretary of State has that. They submitted that like when the recall started. Couldn't you just get it from them?
Could have, but the proper
You
way,
didn't do your job.
if that's your assumption. Any?
Can you go through that, what's on
I'm
that?
sorry about that. Absolutely. So it contains the Secretary of State's date that they received this from the petitioners. It includes the petitioner's name and address, and then on the date that they got clearance to submit it to us, in turn, it tells them that they have to submit this document with us, with their original or supplemental petition list, and that we didn't receive that.
And
It was submitted ahead of time to the state.
You can't submit something that, okay, is that a question or is that a statement?
It's a statement.
Okay. So if that was a question that was posed to me, it has a begin page and an end page. So if you submit the beginning page, you cannot submit something that you have not completed yet. So for instance, if you have not gathered the signatures yet, you wouldn't know how many pages you
But
submitted.
Technically, couldn't they have like gotten all 50,000 signatures in one day and then submitted that, and then the deadline would have passed, and exactly the same thing would be in case?
But they didn't submit the page.
This may be a question, it may be a question for you two, it may be a question more for the recall organizers, but I'll just ask you all, since you're here, because probably one of the big headlines is gonna be the fact that, Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck's name, sorry, I have children, I forget, Donald Duck's name is on the roster. What does it say for the credibility of the entire recall effort when names like that are being put on official documents?
I would think the public would have to answer that question. I wanted to get back to those pages. We didn't let them, the non-submission of those pages, the form, we didn't let that stop the process. We received the documents anyway.
So technically, if that wasn't submitted with the original documents, then all of them are invalid.
No. We did not want to stop or taint the process at all.
You said if
And
they
you're
didn't submit
right.
the original document, then the signatures are not valid. So they're all invalid.
No, they're not
That's
all
what you just
invalid.
said. Would you
We
like to clarify?
also said that we didn't have to process the supplemental documents.
She just
No,
said-
let me finish. We also said that we weren't supposed to really work the supplementals either, but we did it in fairness to the.
You just said, on the record, in front of everybody, that if they didn't submit that original document, then none of the signatures were valid. So we have 0 valid signatures, technically, according to that.
She was giving you examples as to why they could have been.
What does the law say?
Will you let me finish? She was giving you reasons as to why they couldn't perhaps be done. But that's one of the reasons. I mean, we could have stopped at Donald Duck. We wanted the process to go through. We didn't want anybody saying, oh, you left this one out or you left that one out. And again, that supplemental group, we did not have to process those at all. We could have rejected them all. We didn't.
Technically, you have to, according to what she said, unless she wants to clarify it.
No, not necessarily, because I believe that what she was saying was that would be one of the reasons.
So you used your discretion, is what you're saying, not the law.
Well, maybe if you let me finish my sentence, you'll understand what I'm saying.
All right, I'm going. I can go. Yep, we out.
So again, there are a number of reasons as to why these documents, or why we even went through this process. You know, we didn't have to do any of that with the supplemental, with that supplemental group, but we did get an opinion from the AG's office that they wanted us to do them, and guess what? We had already started doing it. Yes, we made copies of blank pages. We wanted to make sure that everything we had was what was needed to give the organizers, to let the organizers know that our staff did everything they could to work to make sure that your information was presented properly. So yes, I think it would have been even more of an argumentative process if we had followed the law and said, we're not doing these, we're only going to do the 27 or 24 that were submitted on that last date, the 27th. So again, this has never happened before. It's like we're going through a process and having changes of how to do this almost on a daily basis. And again, I'm sorry that we could not give you the information ahead of time because it would have tainted the entire process. We wouldn't have been able to finish, and we stuck as close to the law as we could.
Do you think there need to be changes to the recall process? And if so, what changes would you like to see?
I think that probably at the legislative level, there should be a lot of conversations as to this process and maybe either some other kinds of things that would make elections flow more smoothly. Like, for instance, why stop a group of people who are doing elections and processing records? Why would we have to stop and do all this work and figure it out? Why aren't there processes in place that determines exactly how this works? So I think in a way this is going to be a good thing because, as you were saying, it's going to provide an avenue for folks to have a conversation as to what these kinds of how these kinds of records or any other records could be processed, so that it won't stop voters from being able to vote. You know, it won't stop us from making deadlines. We thought actually that we were going to be able to get through this process, and then we started working, and it was like, oh my God, you know, you almost wanted to pull out one of those sheets.
I know you weren't part of the meeting with the Secretary of State and recall leaders, but was there any consultation with the Secretary of State as you were handling this process? And finally, you know, like I know, there are lots of questions still out there about whether or not this process was above board, done the right way. What do you say to people who still have those questions?
I can only say what I've been saying this morning is that when we receive these documents, we made sure that we looked at everything that could possibly be done to make sure that the process was an ongoing process that would meet the deadline, have enough people in place to process the records, and it did take a lot of work. We even tried to put a timeline on the amount of time it would take for one individual to go through the whole process of looking at the names and verifying signatures and making sure that we were all on the right foot. We had to come up with guidelines as to what everybody who worked on these documents were doing was exactly the same. And then another thing that happened was we went through the whole process again. So we did this twice to make sure that this was going to work.
And on the council question about, did you have any consultation with the Secretary of State's office?
Regarding this process, no. No.
Your previous answer, what do you think were some of the biggest challenges or frustrations that you all faced in this entire process?
I think actually going through the originals, going through the supplementals was tough because we had to do it all over again. But at least the originals were in, some kind of order, so that you could know exactly what you're doing, know how to file them. We couldn't even write on the front of the originals, so we even had to write on the back of these documents so that we could find them again. So it was sort of a walk in the dark, but we did everything humanly possible to bring this to an end and to ensure folks that we've done the right thing, and that's about all I can say.
At what point did you guys realize the second batch was duplicates?
Pretty early on.
Yeah, I would say we started looking through, maybe about the second day after we received them, and we started working them like 2 days later. And we wanted to stop, but again, we knew there would be a lot of questions regarding this whole process. So yes, we did it again. And remember, the second batch was in no kind of order. The first batch wasn't in great order. So you had to make sure that if you got one page in the first batch and it was duplicated in the second batch, you had to find it.
Dr. Wilson, about how many Disney characters or fake names signed the petition, would you say, on average?
How many pages did we have?
I don't think the characters themselves sign names.
You know what I mean?
I don't know the number, yeah.
That's what
I have a question. A state representative is proposing a bill that would change the threshold from total number of voters to the number of voters that voted in the election for that particular office. Do you have a position on that? Do you think that's a step in the right direction?
I think that what needs to happen is, as that representative is doing, is to review how this is done now, review how we did it, and then come up with some solutions. So yes, I would be very happy to hear, excuse me, to see any kind of action done on this, because I don't know even if throughout the country anyone's dealt with anything like this. Maybe they have, but I think it's a good idea for that kind of leadership to happen so that it can be looked at and there is a more feasible way to get it done.
Is there a way for us to know, or do you guys know who dropped off that second batch? The one, like, when they did it all together in that second, did they have to sign your name? Do we know who that was?
Well, the organizers would know that, because
So
we're,
they didn't have to sign their name to drop that second batch off, or you just received it?
the only people who could have dropped their information off would have been individuals who decided that they wanted to either join the list or come off the list. But as far as the organizers, we just had the pages, so we wouldn't have witnessed them, the witnesses. As a matter of fact, that was part of the procedure, was to find out if those people that signed the petition were actually registered voters, their addresses, their birth, month and year, I think, on that one. The other petition is a little bit different, and mainly the signature. And then we even had pages where, one that I actually did, where the signature was like a straight line, and the printed part was like a straight line. The signature on the voter records was a straight line.
Maybe I missed this, but do you have a number of the people who followed the law for that 5-day period? How many people either asked to be added or subtracted from the list?
24.
Yeah, 20.
24.
And on that page where the Disney characters are listed, is any valid names listed on that same page?
No, only if you believe in fairy tales.
Are y'all gonna make that page available for us to get video of?
Yes, I'm fine with that.